Producing. So, okay. So my name is Ekua, and I am a coach, and I coach ambitious women globally with a particular interest with American expat women living in London and helping them to transition into London life. I have recently written a book, Be Your Number One Cheerleader, and that book is about the entrepreneurial journey and using some of my own personal stories to talk about coaching and building confidence. So today I am lucky and I'm just super excited to introduce Kanthi because she's got a wealth of experience working with large corporations and also thinking about the cultural diversity aspect of leadership and business. So the first question that I would love to ask Kanthi is to really give us her 5-minute pitch to tell us about her international background, what does she do, and why does she do it? So take it away.
Well, I've got quite an extensive international background. I've worked in about 50 different countries. I've lived in several of them. For instance, I lived in Argentina, in Buenos Aires for some years. I've worked everywhere in South America now, apart from Nicaragua. I lived in Asia for quite a few years. I've worked and lived in many countries in Europe. So what I've done is taken that knowledge and experience of working in those different cultures and added that to my leadership experience, so that I've brought understanding how people operate in a senior environment, and then brought the understanding of how they interact in different cultures. So for instance, Americans are the most extreme. They're very, very forthright. They say as it is. China is the opposite. People will keep their opinions politely to themselves, and so you get this sort of interaction going on in a meeting where Americans are saying, tell me now, and the Chinese are going, well, we'll tell you, yes, of course, and then nothing happens. So being able to just explain some of that just gets away with some of the frustration that people experience when they're working in different environments. But people are people, and it's just being able to take away that arrogance and that kind of understanding what we believe, what are our biases, that really helps. So just helping people understand how they're wired helps in moving them forward.
Brilliant. So Kanthi, tell us the hats that you wear. You're a coach, you're a consultant. Give people a bit of flavor so they can understand what kind of roles that you do.
Well, I work with a number of multinational companies with their senior teams on decision making, understanding the culture, understanding organizational culture, because organizational culture is a very underestimated thing. People think that you can give process and detail to individuals and they'll go with it, but quite often the culture is, oh yes, we listen, but we don't do anything about it. So changing that is quite important. So I work with a lot of multinationals, but I also work with a lot of individuals who are, as I said, working in humanitarian environments, individuals who are working in difficult environments, places in the Middle East, for instance, where there is a war-torn situation. In terms of coaching them and helping them, lead their business, be the best people that they can be in that environment. And then I also coach small and medium-sized businesses, so companies looking to upscale. So they've been quite successful where they are, and they've been given funding, or they're about to try and get investment, and they're going into larger markets. So that's what I do. So it's kind of mixture.
Amazing. That is a real mixed bag of fantastic things. So let's dig a bit deeper into the cultural issues. And I'd really love to ask you, what do you think are the main issues that large organizations should bear in mind when they're, wanting to build a diverse workforce, have people from different cultural backgrounds working together as efficiently as possible? What do you think is some good tips on that?
Well, I think just accepting that not everybody's the same. Organizations try to stereotype this. This is our typical worker, and that's not the case. So acknowledging that nobody is the same wherever they come from is a good starting point. And then so we've got different things that will create our our motivation. And then the second thing is celebrate the differences, because celebrating the differences really, really creates positive drive and energy in an organization. And once you're doing that, all sorts of other things will fall out of it. But if you acknowledge that there's a difference and then celebrate the difference, it's a really good starting point. But most companies struggle with that as overall.
Yeah, well, tell us about actually how do we celebrate cultural diversity, and what have you seen that's been particularly effective? Because I think a lot of people would want to hear about that.
Well, for instance, one of the companies I was working with was doing quite a lot of work in India, particularly, but also in other parts of Asia, and they actually celebrated some of the things like Diwali. Things that were celebrated in country. So so whichever country they were in, they respected and celebrated and shared those events. But they also had special nights that were focused on one aspect, like sport, or so that there was more, that it was more than just work. So it's about the social life and how people interact. And of course, in India, people are far more family-based and community-based than they are in the West. So kind of creating those kind of family interactions was really important for the company. And it just created the links that people don't have always. When you just assume, until the days of Zoom and until the days of now, where we're in the pandemic, people, particularly in the West, didn't see how other people's rooms looked, didn't see where people lived and carried out their lives. Now we've had all of us have had this unique insight into a lot of the people we work with, where they work and how they operate physically. It's created a different relationship, I would suggest.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think that leads me neatly on to a question I think a lot of people will want to know about, which is, as organizations and companies want to enter new markets, what are the three cultural things which you think they need to bear in mind when thinking about perhaps their positioning, their marketing, but also how people are going to work together in country, like across, an international organization?
Yeah, well, firstly, understand the national culture. Now, I'm not asking people to go and do a degree in anthropology or anything like that, but just have an overview of what is the national culture. And two, there's something about product fit, because a lot of companies, there's all sorts of stories of companies that have gone into a new location with a product that just didn't go, just didn't work, just didn't, wasn't popular for all sorts of reasons. So the first thing is understand the national culture. And the second is, when you're negotiating and having those conversations, be clear about what you're trying to achieve from those conversations, because the ways of negotiating in different countries is very, very different. So for instance, people come to the UK and say, oh, well, Ireland, it's just across the way, people speak English, it's exactly the same. It's a totally different culture. Ireland is very family oriented. It's very, what I call a clan culture, and it's defined by the Republic. Is defined by a very clear history. And unless you understand the history, you wouldn't even lump them together, And then the UK is very much more hierarchical, and it's driven by different motivations. So if you don't understand those two things, then you'll end up saying the wrong thing in the first meeting that causes upset rather than causes links and friendship,
Yep. Oh, brilliant. Okay. No, that was fascinating. No, that was really, really interesting. Yeah, so just to obviously acknowledge the time that we're in, which is COVID-19, it's a global health pandemic, that's been really affecting a lot of business, and that uncertainty is, a driver for both individuals and companies. How do you think that, as companies or individuals, people can navigate that, and what should they do? What are your top tips for working at certain times?
I'm sorry. Work. Do you mean just working at certain times, or do you mean just navigating uncertainty? Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of navigating uncertainty, nobody likes uncertainty, but we are in uncertain times, and embracing uncertainty is difficult, and will always be difficult. Different cultures actually respond to uncertainty better than others. And again, it's all about hierarchies and countries that are much more process and decision driven. Germany, for instance, would struggle with the uncertainty that this sort of pandemic creates. So that there's that. And then, if you're doing calls constantly with a country, it's really important to understand what time of the day it is. It's fundamental, but a lot of people forget. The calls I've had at 2 a.m, because people have forgotten that it's 2 a.m. I could count on both hands by now. So yes, it's just common courtesy and respect. I think at the end of the day, it's all about respect. Respecting others makes such a big difference in interactions, in business as well as in life.
No, definitely, definitely. And let's just talk about the theme of leadership. So, I mean, what do you think helps leaders to perform like more effectively from different backgrounds and different cultures?
Well, firstly, be human. And second is listen. I think one of the biggest gaps that leaders have is their listening skills. Some of my friends who are definitely, who have been CEOs of large companies, to get into the habit of speaking at you rather than speaking with you. And so if a leader can have empathy and can practice listening, they'd be going a long way to driving a business, because somebody who's in a senior role will already be able to understand about driving process, driving results, but being the best person they can be in terms of being human is something completely different. And that's what makes them stand out from the crowd.
So I believe that you've written a book in this area. Can you tell us a bit more about that and any insights that you'd like to give to the assembled crowd today?
Okay, well, Performance Edge was written a few years ago. It was written in collaboration with some of my colleagues, and it talks about the little bit of edge that takes us beyond normal. So in terms of leadership edge, in terms of creating organizational tribes, and in terms of understanding how your brains are wired, the neuroscience of operating with other people, how you interact, how you stimulate positive reaction, how you stimulate negative reaction, and also about, it touched on about working in different cultures, giving some case studies of companies that had done it and hadn't really thought it through. So I'll give you an example. When Facebook first went into India, they it was seen that they were going to provide free internet for everyone, and that was great. What they had forgotten was that people may not actually respect having free internet and free Facebook, because it may actually, there's a conspiracy there, there's other things going on, all of the things that TikTok are going through at the moment. So there was that going on. And then secondly, there was just a real concern about strangers bearing gifts, because again, historically, the country has been raided and pillaged by all sorts of countries over time. So they went in and it was completely bombed, and they went out again, and they had to go back in and reinvent what they're offering, and then go back in again. It's a very expensive exercise, it costs millions. Very, very, very wasteful exercise.
No, that is fascinating. So can you give us an example in your experience of a company that's really done, cultural, cross-cultural reorganization and transformation effectively? And what do you think they did that was different as opposed to Facebook, who didn't really understand the climate and the culture?
Mm. It's, companies that do it effectively are few and far between, because brands don't often travel globally unless there's been a lot of thought in advance of time. I suppose the companies that do most effectively are pharmaceuticals, simply because they're providing medication and they're dealing with specific areas of provision and professions. Um, but most organizations try and impose their culture on whichever country they're going into. And then you get the splits. So you get the German arm of the business and then the Germanic adapted arm of the business in South America, So it can just vary very, very quickly.
And how would you advise companies to try and be conscious of the fact there are different cultures, and how can they create a shared culture, Kanthi?
It's very funny because I've been trying to advise companies on working across cultures for a very long time, and mostly they're not interested, and then it goes wrong, and then they come back to me. So I have a lot of repeat business sometime later. But the first conversation, as I say, it's that arrogance of we run a business and therefore it'll be fine in that country, and that doesn't translate through. So I haven't yet found an edge. The only edge is failure. Once companies have tried and failed, they'll come to me for advice. There are some companies, retail businesses particularly, are very good at asking for advice before they go into new territories. I've done quite a lot of work with retailers that are going multinational, and they do have that conversation beforehand, because if you're going to set up a retail business where you're looking for consumer purchase, it's very different from looking at a business to business. See what I mean?
Yes. And still just sticking in this area, like what are your thoughts on language in terms of when an English-speaking company goes into a country that doesn't speak English? Do you think it's best to actually continue with the same language, or to think about whether localizing the content and the marketing is appropriate?
They need to localize language and market. Because the nuances of language are interpreted differently, and we are the words we speak. That's the only thing that humans can interact with. So the language is very different, and so understanding that and localizing, it's really important. One mistake never to make is get somebody who's a non-resident. So for instance, if somebody was Argentinian second generation, don't just assume that they can go to Argentina, or a Brazilian second generation. Don't assume they can go back to Brazil and manage to run the business, because they will have been biased by living in different environments. So then that nuance, that awareness is very clear. But companies do make a big mistake of hiring somebody because they look the part or they sound the part, as opposed to thinking why they're doing it. See, we're all humans, we're all fallible, we all make some mistakes.
Absolutely. And that brings us neatly to the question of the hour, which is confidence. So we really love you, Kanthi, to provide us with your confidence tip and how you've used it.
Okay. Well, my confidence tip is the Oscar Wilde quote, which is be yourself, because everyone else is taken. You just be yourself, understand who you are. Don't take what your parents or somebody thinks you should be. Just be clear about who you are. Be yourself. That will give you more confidence than anything else in the world. and everybody else is taken. You're not anybody else. You don't want to be like somebody else. You want to just be yourself, because everybody's unique, and embracing that uniqueness is something that people don't do. Women particularly aren't great at it.
And Kanthi, how would you suggest, as women, that we feel comfortable to embrace being ourselves? Because we often find that we want to compare ourselves to others, and we think that we look at other people's stories and their journeys, and we think, oh, why can't we become that person's success, or have the things that they have? And how do you think that we can stay focused on ourselves and realize that actually our story and our journey are worth pursuing, and we will, get there in our own time?
Well, what people have achieved is different from those people. So they achieved what they did based on how they got there. So if we want to achieve something, so be clear about what we want as our goal, and then be the best people we can be. So I can't be like you to achieve what you've achieved, and you can't be like me, but you could actually achieve exactly what I've achieved by doing it your way. Which makes me think I might burst into song and sing "I Did It My Way."
Fantastic. Yeah, and I guess just finally, just to close up our segment on confidence, what do you think we can practice daily to help us get in that confidence space, when we might feel a little bit nervous, or a little bit fearful about being the best Kanthi, or being the best Ekua, or whoever else is on the call today?
Well, it absolutely say it. Make it your mantra. None of us spend every day being the best that they can be. We've got all these voices in our heads that are arguing. Oh no, you got to do this. Just got to quieten your mind and think about what it is or who you want to be. I have these disputes constantly, and I just come back to I'm most effective when I'm being me and not being like anyone else. So that's all I can say. Just because the more people embrace who they are, the more powerful they will be as human beings.
No, I absolutely agree, Kanthi. I believe that everyone has their own individual path and their own particular journey that they're on, and we should not try to copy others, because everyone is going to be different. And insofar as leaning into our unique gifts and talent, we are therefore bringing and creating something different. And it's not by any means to say that we shouldn't ask for help and want to find others that will inspire us to do that. So it's also good groups, and to reach out to people that inspire us and follow them, and to build up our own toolkit of things that help us to feel confident. So Kanthi, just before we wrap up, we'd really like to hear something that inspires you, and that you think will help women especially to know that just sticking in their own lane and focusing on building up themselves is the best thing to do.
Blue sky, blue sea, being positive, those are the things that inspire me to be the person I can be. I just go back to, women in the business world can find themselves. It's really important that they find something that gives them peace, so that they get a quiet mind and they can think clearer. But no, just work